The most dangerous feeling in the human experience is not fear, it is not anger, it is certainty. It is the warm, comforting sensation that you are right, that you understand how the world works, that the ground beneath your feet is solid, and the stars above your head are exactly where they are supposed to be. But history tells us a different story. If you look closely at the timeline of human existence, that feeling of certainty has usually been a warning sign that we were about to walk off a cliff. December 14th, 1799, Mount Vernon, Virginia. A man wakes up struggling to breathe. This is George Washington, the father of a new nation, a man of immense wealth and power. He is surrounded by the best doctors in the Western world, men of science, men of logic. And in their desperate attempt to save the life of the most important man in America, they do exactly what 2,000 years of medical tradition taught them to do. They cut him open. Over the next 12 hours, they drain nearly 80 ounces of his blood. They blister his throat with acid. They force him to vomit. They are not trying to kill him. They are absolutely certain they are saving him. They are balancing his humors, following a medical doctrine that had stood unchallenged since ancient Greece. Washington didn't die from his throat infection. He died from the cure. He was the victim of a hallucination that the entire world shared. We like to tell ourselves a bedtime story about history. We imagine it as a staircase, a steady upward climb from the darkness of the caves into the light of the laboratory. We believe that because we live now, we are smarter than the people who lived then. We think the past is just a long list of stupid people making stupid mistakes, while we, the modern humans, have finally figured it out. But that is a lie. The history of human thought isn't a staircase. It is a graveyard. It is a graveyard of bad ideas that were defended by the smartest people in the room. These weren't just simple errors. They were entire reality systems that lasted for millennia. We spent centuries navigating by maps that were lies. We spent generations poisoning our own children with metals we thought were miracles. We built entire civilizations on foundations of cognitive sand. So, we have to ask the uncomfortable question. If the smartest people in history were wrong about the shape of the earth, the source of disease, and the nature of the universe, what are we wrong about right now? To answer that, we have to dissect the anatomy of human error. We have to look at the three great traps that have enslaved the human mind for thousands of years: the trap of authority, the deception of the senses, and the illusion of the self. Let's begin with the oldest prison, the authority of tradition. For most of human history, truth wasn't something you went out and discovered. It was something you were told. It was handed down from the past, wrapped in the robes of ancestors and the ink of holy books. To question tradition wasn't just seen as being wrong, it was seen as being insane. Take the practice that killed Washington, bloodletting. This wasn't a fringe theory. It was the absolute standard of care for 2,000 years. It was based on the idea that the body was a container of 4 liquids: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. If you were sick, it meant the bucket was overflowing. You had to drain it. It made zero biological sense. It had a success rate of 0. In fact, it killed people constantly. But it persisted. Why? Because of the weight of authority. The great physician Galen wrote it down in the 2nd century, and for the next 1,600 years, medical students were taught that Galen could not be wrong. When a patient died after being bled, the doctors didn't think, "The theory is wrong." They thought, "I didn't bleed him enough." This is the power of confirmation bias weaponized by authority. When an entire society agrees on a lie, the truth becomes invisible. We saw this same blindness in how we understood our place in the universe. For 15 centuries, the geocentric model reigned supreme. We knew, with absolute certainty, that the Earth was the unmoving center of everything, and the sun, the moon, and the stars danced around us. This wasn't just about bad telescopes, it was about ego. The geocentric model persisted because it felt good. It told us that we were the main characters of reality. God put us in the center. To suggest otherwise, to suggest that the Earth was just a lonely rock spinning around a massive ball of fire, wasn't just scientifically controversial, It was psychologically devastating. It felt like a demotion. So, when the math didn't add up, when the planets moved in ways that didn't fit the model, we didn't throw out the model. We invented complex, twisted excuses. We drew epicycles, circles within circles, just to make the wrong theory look right. We are masters at protecting our egos from the truth, and this reliance on authority didn't just warp our science, it warped the physical world. Think about the maps used by early explorers. Before the 18th century, maps were not objective tools. They were political propaganda. Mapmakers filled the empty spaces of the world not with unknown, but with fiction. They drew massive southern continents that didn't exist to balance the land in the north. They drew sea monsters to explain dangerous currents. They drew islands where there was only open ocean. We treated ink on paper as if it were the terrain itself. Kings launched wars, and sailors sailed to their deaths, chasing squiggles on a page that some draftsman in London or Lisbon had invented. We assumed that if it was written down, it must be true. But eventually, we broke free. We invented the scientific method. We started testing things. We stopped trusting the ancients. But as we escaped the trap of authority, we walked right into the second, more dangerous trap, the deception of our senses. We are biological machines designed to survive on the African savanna, not to understand the quantum mechanics of the universe. Our eyes, ears, and noses are tools for finding fruit and avoiding predators. They are not tools for finding truth. The most tragic example of this is the story of lead. In the Roman Empire, lead was the plastic of the ancient world. It was everywhere. It was in the pipes that carried their water. It was in the cups they drank from. It was even in the wine itself. The Romans had a syrup called sapa, made by boiling grape juice in lead pots. It created a chemical compound called lead acetate, or sugar of lead. It was delicious. It was an artificial sweetener that they added to everything. But lead is a neurotoxin. It mimics calcium in the body, burrowing into the bones and the brain. It doesn't kill you with a scream. It kills you with a whisper. It causes gout, infertility, paranoia, and cognitive decline. Rome was slowly poisoning its own ruling class. Emperors became erratic. The aristocracy became infertile. And they couldn't see it. Why? Because to the senses, lead was perfect. It was sweet. It was smooth. It was durable. The poison was invisible, and the damage took decades to manifest. Because the cause and the effect were separated by time, and because the danger couldn't be seen or tasted, they ignored it. They trusted their senses, and their civilization paid the price. We did the same thing with disease. For centuries, humanity was terrified of miasma. The miasma theory held that diseases like the Black Death or cholera were caused by bad air. It made intuitive sense. Rotting things smell bad. Rotting things make you sick. Therefore, the smell is the killer. So, we fought the smell. During the Great Plague of London, they burned aromatic woods. They carried posies of flowers. They scrubbed the streets. And while they were busy fighting the odor, they were drinking water, crystal clear water that was teeming with invisible bacteria. We were so obsessed with what our noses could detect that we couldn't conceive of a microscopic world we couldn't see. When a doctor named John Snow suggested in the 1850s that cholera was in the water, not the air, he was mocked. The authorities couldn't see the germs, so they didn't believe they existed. This is the same cognitive glitch that fuels the flat earth belief, even today. It is easy to laugh at flat earthers, but they are just falling victim to the oldest human instinct. I believe what I see. If the world looks flat and I don't feel it spinning, then it must be flat and still. It takes a massive leap of abstract thought to override your own senses. It takes training to accept that reality is often counterintuitive. The truth is usually hidden behind a veil that our five senses cannot penetrate. But let's say we get past that. We use microscopes to see the germs. We use Geiger counters to detect the radiation. We use math to map the stars. We are finally safe, right? No, because the final trap isn't out there in the world. It is inside the machine doing the thinking. It is the illusion of the self. We have a fundamental misunderstanding of how our own minds work. We view ourselves as rational, logical observers of reality. We think our memory is a video recorder and our brain is a computer. Both of those things are wrong. Let's talk about memory. Our entire legal system, our history, and our personal identities are built on the idea that our memory is reliable. If you saw something happen, that's the truth. But modern psychology has cracked the code of memory, and what it found is terrifying. Your memory is not a video file stored on a hard drive. It is a Wikipedia page that you can edit. Every time you recall a memory, your first day of school, a car accident, a fight with a partner, you are not playing it back. You are reconstructing it. You are pulling the fragments out of storage and rebuilding the scene in your mind. And in that process, you add new details. You change the lighting. You insert things that weren't there and delete things that were, and then you resave the memory. The next time you access it, you aren't remembering the event. You are remembering the last time you remembered it. We are walking around with heads full of fiction, fully convinced it is a documentary. We have sent innocent people to prison based on eyewitness testimony that was vividly, confidently, 100% wrong. The brain prioritizes a coherent story over a true one. And then there is the myth of rationality. Yes, we built our modern world, our stock markets, our governments, our economic policies, on the assumption that humans act logically. We assume that if you give people good information, they will make good choices. We assume that people maximize their own self-interest. But look around you. Do they? We are not rational computers. We are emotional tribal primates wearing suits. We are driven by ancient biases that served us well on the savannah but destroy us in the information age. We care more about belonging to a group than being right. We fear loss twice as much as we value gain. We look for evidence that confirms what we already believe, and we blindly ignore evidence that hurts our feelings. To assume that humans will act rationally is the single greatest error in the design of the modern world. It is why stock markets crash. It is why political polarization exists. It is why we can stare a climate crisis in the face and do nothing. We are waiting for a logical reaction from an emotional species, and this leads to the final and perhaps most dangerous illusion of all, the assumption of automatic progress. There is a feeling in the modern world that history is a conveyor belt, that time moves forward and things naturally get better. We think that technology will always improve, that rights will always expand, that we are destined to become a Star Trek civilization. But history shows us that progress is not a law of physics. It is a fragile plant. It needs to be watered. It needs to be defended. The Bronze Age collapsed. The Library of Alexandria burned down. The Roman concrete formula was lost for 1,000 years. Societies can move backward. Knowledge can be lost. Science can retreat into superstition. The moment we assume that progress is guaranteed is the moment we start sliding back into the dark. If we stop paddling against the current of entropy/ignorance, we will drift downstream. So, where does this leave us? It's easy to look back at the doctors bleeding George Washington and call them barbaric. It's easy to look at the map makers drawing sea monsters and call them childish. It makes us feel superior, but that is the wrong lesson. Those people weren't stupid. They had the same size brains as we do. They were just trapped. They were trapped by the limits of their time, the limits of their tools, and the limits of their egos. So, the question we need to ask ourselves, the question that should keep you awake at night, is not, why were they so wrong? The question is, what are we wrong about right now? What is the lead in the wine of the 21st century? Is it the microplastics in our blood? Is it the screens we put in front of our children's faces for 10 hours a day? Is it our obsession with infinite economic growth on a finite planet? What medical practice do we perform today that will make our grandchildren shudder in horror? Chemotherapy, radiation. What scientific truth do we teach in schools today that will be laughed at in the year 2030? The lesson of history is not that we are smart. The lesson is that truth is hard, it is slippery, it is usually counterintuitive. To find it, we need more than just intelligence. We need courage. The courage to kill our heroes, the courage to question the traditions that make us feel safe, the courage to admit that our senses can lie to us. And most of all, we need humility. We need the humility to accept that we are not at the end of history. We are just in the middle of it. We are the ancestors of a future that will judge us just as we judge the past. The only way to be less wrong tomorrow is to admit that we might be wrong today. We have to stop looking for certainty and start looking for the error. Because the map is not the territory, the memory is not the event, and the feeling of knowing is the first step in being deceived.